You are listening to Dove Valley Deep Divers with Erick Trickel
and Lance Sanderson.
Ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
On Overtime Media.
Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. My name is Lance Sanderson, and I am your host as always. Joining me, as usual, is my good friend and colleague. He is your Denver Broncos insider and the senior NFL draft analyst for MileHighHuddle.com. He is the one and only, the man, the myth, and the legend, Mr. Erick Trickel. Erick, what's going on, man? How we doing today?
Doing pretty good, man. I'm very tired today. Haven't been feeling the best this week, and just a bunch of stuff going on. But I'm excited. I'm glad for the Senior Bowl to be coming up, and everything. And the Senior Bowl's been going on. Watching the practices, everybody's going like that. I'm just glad that the draft stuff is finally in full swing. I am in my element, and it feels fantastic.
This is exactly what you live for. I mean, you do the most draft coverage out of pretty much anybody I know outside of the Draft Network. Like, there's big things on the horizon for Mr. Erick Trickel, you know, and it's so much fun to be able to sit down and talk and have these episodes with you and just learn and to be able to gain some knowledge with the way that you watch all these prospects and go about the way that you do things. It's a lot of fun. And now to kind of highlight that this week on Dove Valley Deep Divers, we're going to really go through, you know, Erick has his prospect rankings and he's getting all his scouting reports and stuff done. And we've got a pretty decent idea here of just how the class itself is shaping up. So we're going to kind of power rank this 2020 NFL draft class and go, you know, kind of in the bottom up. We're not going to spoil anything for you in the opening, but it's going to be a pretty fun episode, guys. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, now with the 2020 draft season upon us, I mean, Erick is, again, doing just the most tremendous work for Mile High Huddle and all of the NFL draft community and whatnot. Now, Erick, you've got this kind of grading scale as far as how you want to do your power ranking. It's a kind of standard tier grading scale, but I want you to just explain to everybody before we get started how you have everything rated out and how you're doing all these rankings for everyone.
So this is a standard tiering system that if you are a gamer, then you've probably seen this kind of standard tiering system used before. S tier is the highest tier that there is. It is the highest tier. It is the superior tier. It's basically the cream of the crop, the filet mignon, the Erick Trickel of Mile High Huddle, just all that greatness.
I had to know you were going to throw a jab. This guy, I swear. So go ahead and continue on for us.
And then you have the A tier. That is the very good tier. That is the tier of everything's just very good. Not great, but very good. It's just I mean, obviously, it's the second tiering right there. And just, again, it's just very good. I don't know how else to explain it. It's very good, like everybody else on Mile High Huddle. Then we get to the B tier, and the B tier is kind of like the average tier. It's not good, it's not bad. It's just kind of right there in the middle. Then you get to the C tier, which is just a little bit below average. I mean, we're talking about this, like, if you want to talk about movies, Star Wars movies in particular, this is like where you'll start seeing the prequel trilogy. Like, the C tier is just below average. Then you get to the D tier. This is the worst tiering that there is, and this is the tier where Nick Kendall would fall in. This is the tier where, going back to Star Wars movies, that the Clone Wars would fall in. Or Attack of the Clones, sorry, not the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is an animated show. Fantastic, by the way. Final season's coming out on February 21st. Sorry to take a sidetrack there. Super excited for that. But anyways, the D tier is it's just the worst tier. Doesn't mean that it's a horrible tier when it comes to this. It just means, and related to the draft class, that it's a little bit weaker. I mean, there might be some talent there, but it's could be lacking depth. It could be lacking talent at the top. And how I made these rankings, it's just looking at a little bit of everything. How much talent is there at the top of it? Some classes have very good talent at the top. Some classes have not so good talent at the top. Other classes may be very bottom heavy, which that's not going to be very good because, I mean, you obviously want premier talent at it. So that's just kind of how the rankings go.
So down at the bottom of your tiering system, you know, this is the bottom not necessarily the worst part. Well, actually, it is kind of the worst part of your draft class that you have going on this year. But down at the bottom, and I kind of agree with you with there just not being a whole lot of depth in this class. And we talked about this just a little bit. And unfortunately, we had an episode that didn't get aired. There was just a lack of communication and whatnot, which is no big deal. Sometimes accidents happen. But last week on the recorded episode of the podcast, we actually kind of broke down just a little bit of the safety class that was supposed to be in attendance at the Senior Bowl. And this safety class is really, really bottom heavy. Yeah, you've got the Grant Delpits of the world, you've got the Xavier McKinneys and the guys like that, the first round talents. But really, this safety class is kind of lackluster from top to bottom all the way down. I mean, Ashton Davis is probably a guy that you could look at if you're a Broncos fan and the Broncos don't bring back, Justin Simmons. But at the same time, just working your way down this list, there's really not a whole lot of talent there to work with.
It's very top heavy. I mean, yeah, you have Grant Delpit, you have Xavier McKinney, you have Ashton Davis, and Terrell Burgess out of Utah. Those are all guys that, okay, you're looking there in the first 2 rounds, but after that, outside of a guy like Kyle Duggar from Lenoir Rhine or Jeremy Chin from Southern Illinois, and those guys are more hybrid types, outside of them there's not many guys that really stand out as guys who can rise up into that third, second round. Very, very bottom heavy. You got Brandon Jones out of Texas, who he's just very solid at everything he does. You have Jalen Elliott and Alohi Gilman out of Notre Dame. Very solid guys. Antoine Brooks Jr. out of Maryland. He's a guy that's just falling every day more and more. Kayvon Wallace out of Clemson. He's all right. It's just a very solid depth group with some talent at the top, but it's just the depth is all right, I'm waiting for somebody to really stand out and say, hey, I am worth a better pick than I'm being talked about right now. And at the Senior Bowl, we haven't really seen that. I mean, Kyle Duggar again and Jeremy Chin, they really stood out, but they're coming from small schools, so it wasn't hard for them to stand out. Terrell Burgess, he was standing out, and that's one reason why I included him in that first, second round group, maybe even third. I mean, I'm not sure exactly where his value is going to sit right now. There's still such a long evaluation process, but it's just very lackluster. There's no other way to put it. This is a lackluster safety group and not a year. If you want to be if you are a team that needs a safety, this is not the year that you want that to be the case. Just very lackluster. Unless you are taking one of the guys super early, like McKinney, Delpit, or one of those guys that we've mentioned, you just got to kind of hold your breath and hope.
Well, and with the Broncos going into this free agency class, both Will Parks and Justin Simmons are scheduled to hit free agency, and now we're pretty confident. I mean, there's ongoing discussions, and there have been for a while now with Justin Simmons and the Broncos front office as far as getting a long-term contract done with him. But I imagine if they don't get a long-term contract done before the opening of free agency, they'll probably slap the franchise tag on him. But it really is kind of a sneaky need for the Denver Broncos. Yeah, you got Kareem Jackson in tow, but if you do lose Justin Simmons and he walks in free agency, safety kind of jumps the list of needs for this Broncos squad. Now we're going to move it along a little quickly here and just kind of go to your C tier, and we're going in kind of ascending order, from the D tier up to the S tier. And the next position that we really want to talk about here is the tight end class. And this tight end class, there's really not a whole lot going on. I mean, I know Cole Kmet, out of Notre Dame, he's kind of rising up draft boards and whatnot. Obviously, you've got Thaddeus Moss that just recently declared out of LSU, potentially a good guy that can block and be a decent receiver coming out as an inline tight end. But really, there's just not a whole lot to work with in this tight end group either.
There really isn't. It's a lot of guys that you're just kind of hoping pan out. I mean, with the tight end classes, it's kind of very similar to safety. Some good talent at the top. I mean, granted, it's not as high talented as at the top because there really isn't a first round. I think Thaddeus Moss is the closest to a first round tight end that we have, and Cole Kmet just after that. But what helps separate this and raise it higher than the safety class is that the depth is quite a bit better. You've got Adam Trotman out of Dayton, who he's after the Senior Bowl he's had. If he tears it up at the game, then he's going to be a guy who, which by the time you guys are hearing this, you guys are going to know how the game turned out. So. But Adam Trotman, he's a guy who can really help himself at the game. Charlie Taupomeo out of Portland State. Sorry, let me try and pronounce his name correctly. Charlie Taupomeo out of Portland State. He's another guy, athletic, but he's probably going to be a guy that goes in there at 4th, 5th round. Athletic upside, kind of gamble type thing. Jared Pickney, Colby Parkinson, Mitchell Wilcox, Bryson Hopkins, Harrison Bryant, Josiah DeGuara. Stephen Sullivan out of LSU, the other LSU tight end who's more like a bigger receiver. Sean McKeon, you've got a bunch of other tight ends in this that just very solid depth in it. So not quite as heavy at the top, but a lot more stout throughout than the safety class, which for me, when I'm looking at this, I put a little bit more value on being a strong class throughout than just being super top heavy. So that's why I have tight end just a little bit higher than safety.
Yeah, and a guy at the tight end position that kind of really intrigues me is that Colby Parkinson out of Stanford. You want to talk about long and lengthy. He's, 6'7"? He's got arms like an eagle. Like, seriously, this guy is just absolutely gigantic. Now, he's probably not the best as far as a blocker, more of an effort kind of a blocker, but the guy goes out there and he could be a huge red zone target for a team that likes to, split a tight end out wide and, throw those outside fades and just jump ball situations. I think that with the length that he has, if he can just be a little bit more aggressive, he could be a guy that could potentially step up. I'm not necessarily sure that the Broncos need to go after a guy, but there's just something about the guy that kind of stands out to me on tape. Now, moving forward just a little bit, this is a kind of a heavy debate here, especially with the class that we have at hand, especially at the top of the class. Now, a lot of people were very excited about the quarterbacks this year. And Eric, I kind of agree with you. It is a very top-heavy class, but there is absolutely nothing to work with after about the middle of the second round, maybe early third round. Obviously, you got the guys, the Joe Burrow, probably going to be the number one overall pick. Justin Herbert has been killing it at the Senior Bowl this week in practices, and we're going to see what he can do in the game coming up. You guys, by the time you guys hear this, you'll be able to fully understand what he has done. But then you get, obviously, Tua Tagovailoa out of Alabama. He's most people would consider him potentially the top quarterback in the class without the injury concerns. But after that, I mean, Jordan Love, the big arm talent, Jacob Eason, underclassman that played very well for Chris Peterson up in Washington. Jake Fromm, we're really not kind of sure with him. I mean, I could see him potentially being a tail end of the first round guy to a team like the New England Patriots, but I don't know. It's probably going to fall through the second round, could potentially fall into late day two in the third round. But outside of that, there's really not a whole lot to work with this quarterback class.
You basically hit the nail on the head. It's very top-heavy. There are only 5 quarterbacks in my top 100. I don't think this is actually as good of a class. Again, very top-heavy. And then after you get past those top 5, it's a whole lot of nothing. I mean, okay, Nathan Stanley, okay, there's a development guy for you. Steven Montez, okay, there's another guy that might be a development guy. I mean, but he's had a very rough week at the Senior Bowl. Anthony Gordon, he's had not a super rough week, but not the best of weeks. Tyler Huntley, all right, you got to run a specific scheme for him. Kevin Davidson, he showed out at the Shrine during the Shrine Bowl week out of Princeton. All right, it's Princeton to the NFL. That's a big jump. I mean, he's a guy that you're looking at for a practice squad spot, number 3 quarterback kind of thing. James Morgan, Florida International, he's in same thing as Kevin Davidson. There's no one that really stands out like, okay, hey, maybe they can be something. I mean, Cole McDonald, he absolutely struggled in Hawaii. I don't have Jake Fromm as a top 100 pick. I think that his ability to play on schedule is very good, but I think that there's some concerns about his arm strength. Granted, he's very smart, and his ability to play off schedule just isn't there. I mean, he's like Daniel Jones a little bit last year. Smart guy, doesn't have the most tools in the toolbox, and can make things work, but Daniel Jones showed a lot more ability when plays would start to break down up front and being able to move out and make plays happen. When Jake Fromm gets out of the pocket or push out of the pocket, his accuracy drops tremendously. So people are going to say that this is a hot take and everything, but I've gone back and forth on this, and I've spent a lot of hours evaluating this quarterback class. And I'm sorry, I don't think that this is a great class whatsoever. Top heavy, those top 5s, yeah, those are great talents. But as I said earlier, I'm looking a lot at the depth of the class too. And there just isn't depth to the quarterback class this year.
Now, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the guy that wore 2 shades of crimson on his helmet at the Senior Bowl this week in Jalen Hurts. Now, this is a guy, obviously, he's very mobile, very good as far as throwing on the run. There's some accuracy concerns, but he did play very well down in Oklahoma this year for the Oklahoma Sooners and Lincoln Riley's offense. It's just extremely explosive. Tell me about a little bit about Jalen Hurts and where you might think that he's going to fall in this draft class.
I think right now he's looking at day 3. Simple reason for that is he's not much of a quarterback right now. There is so much technical work that he needs to be a quarterback in the NFL. He can run and he can throw, but that's all he's got. Like, the technique aspect, I can't undersell this whatsoever. He doesn't have the technique down to be a quarterback. The footwork's a mess. His handoffs under center were terrible this last week at the Senior Bowl. He really struggled. He was one of the worst-looking quarterbacks there, which, well, probably the third worst, I'd say. Shea Patterson and Steven Montez definitely had him beat. And out of 6 quarterbacks, okay, yeah, he's right there kind of in the middle, but it's just so much work that needs to be done. Like, you want to be running the right specific scheme for him, and there's just not many teams that are running that scheme. Okay, maybe the Ravens will really like him and decide, hey, maybe we could use another backup for Lamar Jackson and eventually move on from Robert Griffin. All right, there's one option. I can't think of another team, though, that would use a quarterback like him the way he has. Maybe the Texans, now that I think about it. Maybe the Texans can use him a little bit, trying to coach him up. But there's just not many options for him, and with the technical work that he needs, it's going to be rough to really find a place for him that he fits.
That's a great breakdown, man. It is absolutely a great breakdown, because I was just thinking right before you said it, the only team that I can think of that would actually be able to use a skill set like Jalen Hurts would be either the Baltimore Ravens as a backup to Lamar Jackson, or potentially with the way that we've seen, Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill down in New Orleans. I mean, maybe that would be a perfect marriage to get Jalen Hurts down there with Sean Payton.
But the Chiefs would be another one.
The Chiefs would be a good...
I'm saying, as you're talking, I'm sitting here trying to think of other teams that might. And honestly, I'm not so sure about the Saints just because they have this kind of gadget guy already in Taysom Hill. So I'm really stuck on just the Ravens, the Chiefs now, and the Texans. I can't, there's no one else.
Yeah, there's really... it's just so limited for Jalen Hurts. It really is. It's hard to kind of project where the guy's going to go. And now... Just
real quick.
Excuse me, go ahead.
If he showed a little bit better footwork during this week, then I can see a few more teams being willing to take a shot on him. But his feet were really poor. Like, this is a guy that I've linked to Minnesota a couple times because I can see, for multiple reasons, Gary Kubiak taking a liking to Jalen Hurts. But after his footwork issues, I just don't see it. I think that now, with it, I think Jake Fromm makes a lot more sense. But then you have those issues of him outside of the tackle and throwing the ball on the move, so that's still questionable, but... Again, just going back to Jalen Hurts, where? There's 3 teams that we've highlighted.
I got a 4th one, and it might actually be a fairly intriguing option for you. How about up in the Pacific Northwest to go back up Russell Wilson for the Seahawks?
That wouldn't... It would...
It's a rough comparison, but you know what? With the way that Russell Wilson moves around, and I could see Jalen Hurts potentially being a guy that could step in and do something like that. Especially
I can see it
on the run.
I could definitely see it. I think that Pete Carroll would be willing to not necessarily design a whole offense that fit him just in case he has to play, but I think that he would be able to step in and maybe not play great, but play well enough in that scheme that they have. But it's also a scheme that Russell Wilson has to kind of go off the plan a lot anyways. So I can see it. There's 4.
Yeah. Now, there's definitely a lot more than 4 teams that can go into our next group and take the top guy, and he's probably going to be the top overall rated guy on most boards going into the 2020 NFL Draft, if he isn't already, and that is the one and only Chase Young out of Ohio State. But, outside of Chase Young, I mean, you've got A.J. Epinesa, you've got K'Lavon Chaisson out of LSU. Really, it's another one of these classes where it's kind of just top-heavy, but there's really not a whole lot of depth. Eric, go ahead and speak on it.
Yeah, it's just as you said, there's just not a whole lot of depth. There's a lot of guys that are interesting, but there's also a lot of guys that are falling. Like, obviously, you have Chase Young, you have A.J. Epinesa, you have K'Lavon Chaisson. All right, those are your first-round guys. You've got Julian Okwara out of Notre Dame and his teammate Khalid Kareem. They're very solid, but they're guys that valuations of them are just kind of hit or miss. It depends on who you ask. You have Yetur Gross-Matos out of Penn State. All right, he's a solid guy. Alton Robinson, he had a very poor week at the Senior Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised now if he's fallen somewhere either round 3 or even day 3. Bradley Anae out of Utah. All right, he's very solid. But you also have to look at guys like Zach Bond. All right, teams are considering moving him off ball a little bit. You have Marlon Davidson, who's not really an edge. He's going to be used more as an interior defensive lineman at the NFL. Jabari Zuniga, Jonathan Greenard. Those are 2 guys that they still have quite a bit to prove. So it's there's talent here, and I almost considered putting this in the B tier, just because there is a decent amount of talent, but there's a lot of guys that are listed as edges that they're not going to be playing edge in the NFL. Anthony Jennings, he's probably going to be playing off-ball in the NFL. Josh Uche out of Michigan, he's probably going to be playing more of a hybrid type role, off-ball and edge. You've got Carter Coughlin, who they're already talking about moving to off-ball. You have Marlon Davidson. I can't remember if I actually just said him or not, but he's probably going to move to the interior defensive line. It's just a lot of guys that, all right, they're playing edge in college, but they're probably not going to be playing there in the NFL. So that's just basically what it comes down to. Good quality talent, but some of that talent, not NFL edges.
Now, a guy that's you had mentioned as far as, playing that hybrid role, going back and looking at what the Broncos did this last year with Justin Hollins, and I think he's probably just a little bit higher of a caliber player than Justin Hollins. Josh Uche out of Michigan has been absolutely lighting it on fire at the Senior Bowl this week, guys. And he's been playing off ball. He's been playing at the edge. He's been getting after the quarterback in pass rush situations. I'm very intrigued by this young man. I really am. And we last week we kind of talked a little bit about it, and with the Broncos and obviously having Justin Hollins, Malik Reed, Bradley Chubb, Von Miller, they're probably not going to be looking for a guy that could be that, a depth edge player. But if you could go out and get Josh Uche in like the 4th or 5th round, I don't think that there's any way that you can pass up on the guy. But anyways, guys, we're going to have to take a quick break here really fast. But before we do, I just want to remind you all to head on over to milehighhuddle.com to check out all of our written content on your Denver Broncos. At the Huddle website, you'll get breaking news, analysis, and opinion articles, as well as in-depth film breakdowns of not only Broncos players, but matchups to watch in an upcoming game or even our top-notch NFL draft coverage. Also, make sure you take a couple minutes to create your own personalized profile and hit up the comment section to voice your opinions on any topics that you agree or disagree with. It's completely free, it's easy to use, and we all love to discuss Broncos football with our readers. You can also sit in with us during the live game thread to talk your thoughts on how the team is performing as well. So with that, we got to step away for a few minutes. We'll be right back. Sit tight.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys, welcome back to Dove Valley Deep Divers. We just got working our way through Erick Trickel's tiers of the way that this NFL draft class is coming up here in 2020, and got breaking down the D tier and the C tier, and it's kind of an interesting conversation. Obviously, we just broke down the quarterbacks and the edge class and whatnot. Now, going towards the B tier of this class. Now, Eric, I haven't done a whole lot of work on the linebacker class, but there is one guy that has seemingly been kind of having a pretty big week this week at the Senior Bowl, and Akeem Davis-Gaither out of Appalachian State. Probably a late round guy. I'm not necessarily sure a whole lot about the guy. No?
I would not be shocked at all if he goes round 2.
Really? Has he actually bumped his stock up that high?
I think he helped the stock of the Senior Bowl, but I think that you are just sleeping on it. Man,
okay.
Have you not watched any of the videos or read any of my work that I've done on linebackers?
It's been a minute. I'm not gonna
I don't
lie.
think I've done anything about linebackers in the draft this year that has not mentioned Akeem Davis-Gaither. Outside of maybe one that I can't remember if I actually did or not, that might have talked about overrated linebackers, because he's not. He is probably he is actually my favorite linebacker in the class. He can cover, he can find fits in the run scheme. He is like a poor man Isaiah Simmons cut type. He has been used all over the defense for Appalachian State. He's played out in the slot, he's played out on the boundary, he's played free safety, single high safety, as we're starting to refer to them as, because free safety, strong safety, the roles are kind of intertwining. You have your high safety and you have your low box safety. He's played in the box, he's played edge, he's played even with his hand in the dirt in a 3-point stance. He has done it all, and he does it all very, very well. But yeah, this is the next group on my list, because I like the linebacker class a lot, and it's not just Akeem Davis-Gaither. You have Patrick Queen, who's rising up boards. You have Jacob Phillips, who's very solid. You have Evan Weaver, who's solid, but the NFL game doesn't really fit him anymore. You have Isaiah Simmons. I'm not sure where to really put him, safety or linebacker. Isaiah Simmons, I feel more comfortable putting at linebacker than safety, but he is a true chess piece for a defense. I mean, he is tremendous. You've got Cameron Brown, who's a good cover guy, Logan Wilson, who is really having a good week at the Senior Bowl, showing a lot more in coverage than people were expecting. Francis Bernard, Malik Harrison. You've got the guys that are moving over from edge, the hybrid types in Zach Bond, Carter Coughlin, Josh Uche, which I think we're going to see him more off ball than on the edge in the NFL. You have Kaliki Hudson, who's really great for has been having a strong week at the Senior Bowl and is just such a tremendous talent. Blake Lynch out of Baylor, he's another one to keep an eye on as during this whole draft process. Marcel Spears, Dele Harding, Michael Divinity. You've got Anthony Jennings, who's another one of those guys that might be moving over. Kamal Martin. There is a lot of talent here. Troy Dye, who I didn't even just slipped over my head. Jordan Brooks. I can go on and on and on. The issue is that there's just no top talent. Like that is the whole issue with this. Is it is a draft of linebackers that is filled with good quality guys from about round 3 to round 6. But outside of one or two names, you're not looking at many guys to go on in the first 2 rounds. Like it's not that strong of a class at the top.
So let me get this right here. And the way that you're kind of just highlighting this out is just especially with going back to Akeem Davis Gaither, excuse me, and the way that he's played. I obviously am sleeping on him, and Isaiah Simmons, those kind of chess piece players. So outside of those 2 guys, there's really not a whole lot of top heavy talent in the linebacker class. Or am I completely off base on that?
I think there's a little bit more, but outside of those 2 guys, like. I mean, maybe Francis Bernard can crack the second round, but he's going to have to test insane. But Malik Harris, or Kenneth Murray, too. I completely spaced Kenneth Murray, who is probably the only true linebacker that has a first-round grade. But Isaiah Simmons, Murray, and Akeem Davis-Gaither, those are the only 2 or 3 guys right now that I will say that I firmly believe should be going in the second round at the very least. Well, in the first 2 rounds, sorry, should put it that way. I mean, there are a couple other guys. Patrick Queen might be able to rise up there. I want to see his testing before I declare that. Logan Wilson, Francis Bernard, those are other guys that can help themselves and crack that area. But Troy Dye, Marcus Bailey, I mean, the list goes on. But as I said, it's just very heavy from the 3rd to like the 5th, 6th round. And some of those guys in the 3rd round, yeah, they can boost themselves. But for right now, man, until that combine, until they have that chance, it's just very deep, but lacking the talent at the top.
Yeah, and as everybody knows, I'm all about that. I'm that Logan Wilson truther, man. I'm really excited to see how he does as far as his testing goes. I'm not necessarily sure that he's going to test outside of like off the charts. He's not going to blow anybody away at the combine, but I'm kind of intrigued to see the lateral agility, his 3-cone, the shuffle drills and stuff like that. There's so much to like about the guy, and like you said, he has had a huge Senior Bowl. Tony Pauline from Pro Football Network actually came out and highlighted him in a tweet a couple days ago and said that he's been absolutely amazing. Now, to kind of wrap this up just a little bit, what's a guy that with the Broncos and their coverage, and I'm not going to necessarily say it's going to be a supreme need. Alexander Johnson could potentially turn into a better coverage guy, but I think he's probably better suited as, that run stuffing guy, fill the A-gap, come out on the blitz. Todd Davis has shown just a little bit better in coverage. Josie Jewell, we're just not sure, especially with the lack of athleticism with the guy. What's a guy round 4 or 5 that you could see that the Broncos are really going to try to target?
Round 4 or 5? That's a little bit rough because obviously we're still having just draft positioning kind of settled down a little bit. Cameron Brown, maybe. I mean, he's very much a cover guy. He's a little bit lighter. He's kind of in that same mold of Isaiah Simmons and Akeem Davis-Gaither, able to play multiple different spots on the defensive side of the ball. Justin Cernett of Wake Forest, maybe. But Mohamed Berry, like there's a few guys, but until we get to the combine, it's going to be pretty hard to just kind of settle on people.
And that's a fair assessment of the situation. Now, we got to get going again here, guys, and the next position that you have on your tiering system is the interior of the offensive line. And now with the Broncos, especially with the potential possibility of cutting, Ronald Leary and moving on from that contract, they're opening up a big hole at the right guard position. And this interior offensive line class, it seems to be fairly solid, especially if you're looking for a swing guy, the guy that can potentially play 2 positions. And a guy that has absolutely been killing it down at the Senior Bowl this week has been Lloyd Cushenberry out of LSU. I mean, the starting center for the LSU Tigers is just absolutely amazing. He went up against Javon Kinlaw and won a one-on-one, and Kinlaw, before he got hurt, was absolutely tearing people apart. Like, nobody could block the guy. And Lloyd Cushenberry went up and stood his own. Now, outside of that, obviously your top guy is Nick Harris out of Washington, who has seemingly struggled down there in Mobile. What out of those 2 guys is the one that's going to separate them to be the top interior offensive lineman in this class?
Well, what needs to be understood is the practice setting, and that doesn't always set certain interior offensive linemen up for success. Nick Harris, I always knew, was going to go into the Senior Bowl practices and struggle. Why? Because they often have you trying to block one-on-one in a phone booth, and that just isn't his game. He doesn't have the most power. He wins with technique, he wins with athleticism, and he wins with his movement. He very much relies on the talent around him as well, passing off blocks, executing double teams, very smart. He's just not the strongest guy. It's that simple. He's not the strongest guy to handle the power that he's going to have to be dealing with in a one-on-one situation like you have in Senior Bowl practices. Get not shocked at all he struggled, expected it. He's still my number one interior offensive lineman. I'm not concerned about his size. All word that I got was that he was playing under 290 pounds during the season, and he's over 290 pounds now at the Senior Bowl. But Lloyd Cushenberry, he did help kind of raise himself a little bit. And Cesar Ruiz is a guy that I think, too, that needs to be watched on. Those are probably my top 3 interior offensive linemen right now. But overall, this class is actually very strong. Not the heaviest at the top. I mean, Creed Humphrey returning to school actually really hurt this class quite a bit. But Tyler Biadasz out of Wisconsin, he's the guy that's falling down my board. And part of it is because of people that are rising up. We have Cole Cabral out of Arizona State, athletic mover. You have Sean Pollard. You have John Simpson, who struggled a little bit at the Senior Bowl, though. But he's a solid guard option. Logan Stenberg. You've got Solomon Kinley. You've got Damian Lewis, Adrian McGee, 2 LSU teammates of Lloyd Cushenberry. Ben Bredesen, my boy Michael Onwenu, who absolutely killed it at the Shrine Bowl. 360-plus pounds and moves like he's 300 pounds. Tremendous guy. Like, just such a tremendous interior offensive lineman. You have Jonah Jackson, who's probably my top guard in the NFL draft. Very underrated. Solid pass setter. Very good mauler on the run game, which, depending on the scheme you're running, is where he's going to be valued at. Shane Lemieux, Jake Hansen. You've got Zach Shackelford. You've got Matt Hennessy, Donnell Stanley, Keith Ishmael out of San Diego State, who's had a very strong year. And that's not even including guys that played tackle at college, like Ben Barch or John Runyon, or there's one other one that I had on right there on the tip of my tongue that I can't remember, moving inside. Very solid class. Robert Hunt, that's the other guy. He played tackle at Louisiana, and he's probably going to be moving inside to guard. Very solid class. Not very heavy at the top. It's kind of like linebacker in that regards of just very, very stout in the middle of it. Unlike linebacker, though, there isn't really any talent at the top, but it's just much deeper. Very, very deeper. Much deeper. More deeper. There we go.
Much more deeper is the way that you should
Yes.
probably say that. Now, with Ben Barch, the small school guy, he's a converted tight end. He was playing tight end and moved to left tackle for St. John's. Small school guy. He actually came up into the Senior Bowl, and he made my list of the guys that impressed me the most, or that I found that it has impressed the most in Senior Bowl practices, if you read my article on, I believe it was Wednesday. And now, they're very raw, very going to be a developmental guy. I'm not sure if you could probably move him inside, but just the footwork.
I wouldn't say he's really raw. I think his technique is one of his strongest suits. I think the biggest concern with him coming into the Senior Bowl was how is he going to be able to handle himself against these Power 5 defensive linemen. And
he absolutely showed out.
He was fantastic all week long. Obviously, I want to see how he does in a game-like setting, which is something that I'm going to be watching out for Nick Harris, because that is a setting that's going to benefit him more a little bit than practice as well. But he was fantastic. I have no doubt that in a zone scheme, a team that's going to rely on his athleticism and his movement, Ben Barch can be fantastic in the NFL.
And I was actually going to say with the ability to move around, obviously with the conversion from a tight end, he's an athletic kind of a guy, just bulked up and turned into a quality left tackle. Now, just the way that he has handled himself in practices, that was one of the reasons why the small school guy and be able to go up against the bigger school competition, he actually kind of has turned some heads. Now, one thing I want to get out there before we move on, obviously you kind of ran through it with Cesar Ruiz and Ben Bredesen and Michael Onwenu. All three of those guys starting interior offensive linemen for the Michigan Wolverines over the past, I believe, 2 seasons. Now, that's a pretty impressive interior offensive line. To get 3 guys that are going to be potentially not early day 2, but day 2, day 3, early day 3 prospects out of one singular offensive line, that speaks volumes to what they're doing up in Michigan right now. Now, On the other side of the ball is the interior of the defensive line, and this is the next position that we want to kind of talk about. And obviously, there's a lot of talent to work with, especially at the top side. You've got Javon Kinlaw, who has been tearing it up at the Senior Bowl prior to his knee injury. Obviously, you have Derek Brown, the insane freak athlete out of Auburn. There's just so much to like about this interior defensive line class. Obviously, you got Raekwon Davis coming out of Alabama. You've got Lecky Fotu out of Utah. I mean, there's just Khalil Davis out of Nebraska. You had highlighted him if we would have got that episode out. You had highlighted Khalil Davis out of Nebraska and I believe their brothers, his brother Carlos Davis. Now, this is a fairly top-heavy but also very well-rounded interior defensive line class. Eric, what do you think?
I would say that good talent at the top. I mean, with guys like Javon Kinlaw and Derek Brown, there's talent at the top. There's good talent up until probably about the 5th round. After that, you're just kind of picking at the scraps, trying to find something. Raekwon Davis, I think he ended up pulling out of the Senior Bowl. If he has, I haven't heard anything. If he's actually there, I haven't heard anything about him. I actually we'll have to double check that. McTelvin Agim out of Arkansas, he had a really good Shrine Week. Bravion Roy, he had a really good Shrine Week. He's there at the Senior Bowl. Darian Daniels at Nebraska, he's made people take some notes about him at the Senior Bowl. Jason Strobridge, I have him listed as an IDL, but he's probably going to be moving out to edge a little bit, playing kind of a hybrid inside-outside role in the NFL. You've got Laryl Murchison, Robert Landers, Davon Hamilton, Neville Gallimore, Robert Wenser, Javon Kinlaw, who I previously mentioned, Ross Blacklock, Justin Matabuike. You've got Garrett Mariano out of UAB. You've got John Penisini out of Utah. Eli Handback, you've got Benito Jones, Raekwon Williams, Rashard Lawrence. There's a lot of talent in here, but there is a point where you just kind of hit that brick wall and or not hit that brick wall, but hit the cliff and the talent just stops. So, very, very top heavy and lasts a little bit longer throughout the top than quarterback does, which is one huge reason why I have this higher than quarterbacks. You got top 10 talent. You've got talent there in the 2nd round. You've got talent there in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. But then it's just like, all right.
Yeah, and with Laryl Murchison out of North Carolina State, he's actually been causing some havoc down there in Mobile this week. He had a nasty spin move on an interior move in one-on-one situation and got wide open for a sack. It's just been absolutely amazing to watch the guy, but probably the guy that's been making the most noise outside of probably, I think, Joshua Uche as far as a pass rusher goes. Jason Strobridge has been absolutely killing it, absolutely annihilating people. Bradley Anae's been doing some pretty good work as far as the edge rushing prospects go. But he's been kind of moving around all over the place, playing some off-ball linebacker as well. But Jason Strobridge, inside, outside, it really doesn't matter. He's been kind of an unblockable force. Now, guys, we're getting a little bit long here. We're going to have to take another break. We'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. We're breaking down the 2020 NFL Draft class as far as the tiers go, and we just worked our way through the B class over this last segment, and now it's time to get to the cream of the crop. You know, not necessarily the best. We're going to save the best for last, but obviously with the way that everything's working out, I'm not necessarily sure I kind of agree with you, Eric, on this one. I think that this next position needs to be moved down just a little bit, especially after the guys that have decided that they were going to go back to school. But the running back position, there's some pretty good talent up at the top. I really don't think that there's a whole lot of depth throughout the class, though.
I could be completely wrong. This computer and slap you.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
The lack of depth of the running back class. I will reach to this computer and slap you.
I'm not sure, man. I just don't know. It was a lot better. You. It was a lot better with Travis Etienne and Najee Harris in there, and don't tell me that I'm wrong on that because I'm absolutely right.
Of course, those talents are going to make it better. But this draft class at running back still has tremendous amount of talent. And here, let me educate you. All right. So, at the top, we have, obviously, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, and Jonathan Taylor. Very good talent at the top. This is where you would run into where Travis Etienne would be, is after those three. All right, so you have who would have been a number 4 running back, at least for me right now. He went back to school. Very questionable decision as to why. Don't even want to get into that. But then you have guys like Keyshawn Vaughn, Zach Moss. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, maybe Anthony McFarland in this group here. You've got Reggie Corbin, LaMichael Perrine, Cam Akers. And this is kind of the group where Najee Harris would be in. Like, I can feel that. Eno Benjamin, he's there as well. But now you get to the depth. And hear me out. J.J. Taylor. JaMycal Hasty, A.J. Dillon, Adrian Killens, Jonathan Warren, Benny LeMay, Michael Warren. You've got Reggie Corbin, who I actually think I said it before. James Robinson out of Illinois State. Tremendous Shrine Week, by the way. Fantastic guy. Would love him in the Broncos if they don't land Clyde Edwards-Helaire, although he's not a blocker. Very good in space. Antonio Gibson, running back receiver talent. You've got Javon Leake out of Maryland. Very good talent overall. DJ Dallas, very good 3-down skill set. Can block, can catch, can run the ball. Very tough between the tackles. You've got Jason Huntley out of New Mexico State. Very patient, very tough between the tackles. Not the most explosive guy, but can definitely pick you up yards. Tony Jones, another 3-down back guy who can, again, catch, block, and run between tackles with toughness. You have Rico Dowdle out of South Carolina who had a Shrine Week. You've got Cameron Scarlett who's all right there. You've got Darius Anderson. You've got Salvin Ahmed. You've got Levante Bellamy. There is a lot of talent in this running back class, and I actually like the depth of this class better than the talent at the top, because I think that there are some true gems hidden in this running back class. So don't sit there and tell me that this running back class lacks depth. Boy, I will sit down and educate you.
Then do it properly and tell me who the guys that are going to be in the 4th, 5th, 6th round that are going to be the standout guys. Obviously, I understand that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably not going to be there, but you've got the Eno Benjamins of the world. You've got the Kyler Hill out of Mississippi State. There is some talent there. I don't know, man. With
Kyler
the talent
Hill
of
returned to school, by the way.
Oh, excuse me. I missed that one. So please forgive my ignorance. But at the same time, with the depth of the wide receiver class, the depth of the cornerback class, those guys are going to be pushed down to the bottom. There's just nothing that really stands out to me. And I do apologize if I'm wrong on this, but there's just so much. I mean, obviously the top end of this class is very good. DeAndre Swift is a guy that I've been following and fell in love with when I was watching Sony Michel and Nick Chubb and those guys over in Georgia. DeAndre Swift was a guy that really stood out to me a few years ago, and I was always pounding the table that he is going to be a guy that's going to be a first-round pick. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins and the work that he has done at Ohio State. Travis Etienne going back to school, whatever, that is what it is. Najee Harris, why did he go back to school as well? But with Jonathan Taylor, there's so many miles on the guy. He ran for back-to-back 2,000-yard seasons at Wisconsin. He's your typical everyday bell cow back at Wisconsin. And we've outside of Melvin Gordon, and even now you look at him, Melvin Gordon year 5, he's fallen off a cliff. There's a lot to like about the class, but with the depth of the wide receivers and the depth of the cornerbacks and the depth of the interior defensive line, I don't know that I necessarily agree with you that these guys at the depth of the running back position are going to be able to stand out and get into the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. I'm sorry.
Well, it's not like I had the running back class above the wide receiver or cornerback class yet. There is a reason why it's not above those two classes in my rankings. Yes, talent is going to get pushed down, but you still have options there. You have JaMycal Hasty out of Baylor. Absolutely love his game. Very patient, very tough between the tackles, but has extra explosiveness. James Robinson, Raymond Calais out of Louisiana Lafayette. He's another guy who, in space, he can cause a lot of damage to you, but he can make himself small through the tackles and get into the secondary and make plays happen. Antonio Gibson, I think he's more of an offensive weapon, but he can run hard, he's very patient, and he's got an extra gear to him. Joshua Kelly out of UCLA. These are guys that are going to get pushed down a little bit because of other classes. And other classes pushing down talent in running back class doesn't mean that there isn't talent. You have to also factor in the fact that the running back position isn't valued like wide receivers or cornerbacks are. So that alone is going to push some of these talents down. DeAndre Swift, he's probably a top 15 player in this draft. I would be shocked if he goes in the top 25 because the running back position just doesn't have the value. J.K. Dobbins should be a first-round running back. Does he go there? I don't think so because running back's just not a valued position. So there is plenty of talent in this class, and it has really good depth. I mean, I can go over all the names again and just break down their game, but we would be here for hours doing that. Just a lot of talent. This is a strong running back class. It's got talent at the top. It's got good depth. And 3 guys returning to school doesn't destroy this class whatsoever. It's not like we're the offensive tackle class, where if Tristan Wirfs or Andrew Thomas or some of these other underclassmen decided to return to school, that it would have absolutely killed it. Still plenty of talent in this class, man.
That's a fair assessment, man. And like I said, forgive my ignorance. You are the senior NFL draft analyst for Mile High Huddle for a reason, man. Thank you for dropping some knowledge on us. Now we got to kind of keep going here, and we were just talking about it with the depth of this cornerback class. This is the next position in your tier rankings here in the A tier. This cornerback class, obviously very solid. You've got Jeffrey Okudah, Christian Fulton, Trevon Diggs, guys like that. Jeff Gladney is a guy that you've been pounding the table for to appear in a Broncos uniform. AJ Terrell out of Clemson, Bryce Hall out of Virginia. Like there's a lot of quality names and a lot of quality depth. The guy that I really like is Cameron Dantzler. So there's just so much to like about this cornerback class, and like I said, forgive my ignorance. I just think that and you're absolutely right, with the premium that is put on the offensive tackle, with the wide receiver, with the cornerbacks, quarterbacks, stuff like that, the running back position obviously is going to get pushed down the draft a little bit. Now, Eric, outside of the guys that I listed, what are the guys that are really kind of speaking to you in the cornerback class this year?
Well, I mean, this is one of the better cornerback classes that we had. Troy Bright Jr., Damon Arnett, those are two guys that I think Damon Arnett could push for the second round, but Troy Pride, he's a guy probably round 3, round 4 that I'd be looking at. Dane Jackson out of Pittsburgh, he answered a lot of questions down there at the Senior Bowl. Darnay Holmes, he's answered some questions. Asang Bassi, it all depends on what kind of scheme you run for him. Keith Washington out of West Virginia, he had a very strong week at the Shrine Bowl. He definitely helped himself there. He's probably a guy 6th, 7th round, depending on if he gets invited to the Combine and how he looks out there. John Reed out of Penn State, he's a solid later round option. There's a guy out of Iowa whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce. Nick's not here to correct me about it. But he's getting a lot of talk. There's a lot of people talking about how he is a top 8 corner in this class. And I can't say I fully disagree with it. He is a very good talent. Lamar Jackson out of Nebraska. You have just Kendall Vildor out of Georgia Southern, plus his teammate out of Georgia Southern, Monquavian Brinson. Good talents there as well. There's a lot of talent here. And between cornerback to running back, there is a decent distance here. I threw running back in A tier because I wasn't comfortable putting it in B tier because it's not close to interior defensive line or interior offensive line. There's definitely a huge gap there. But it's not quite there on the same level as cornerback or either the next two. And it's not S tier worthy. But anyways, with cornerbacks, I mean, just a lot of talent, very heavy at the top. I mean, obviously, there's the guys you mentioned, all looking as possible first-round options. You've got good depth throughout. I think that at one point you do start to hit a little bit of a wall, but I think that the top probably 20 in the cornerback class could potentially get drafted in the first 6 rounds, like maybe more. Very strong class, very strong throughout. Plenty of options for teams, just very good class overall. I don't know what else to say. Very good class.
Yeah, it's a very good class. And like I said, you've been pounding the table for quite some time on Jeff Gladney, just a perfect scheme fit, and obviously the depth, the first 3 rounds, there's just so much to like about the guys there. Obviously, not everyone's going to be a perfect fit for the Broncos, but there are, 4 or 5 guys that the Broncos could potentially be looking at, especially if Chris Harris Jr. leaves in free agency. Now, on the other side of the football, another big need, a perceived need with Broncos country happens to lie at the tackle position. And this is another very, very good class. Obviously, you've got, Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, the guys like that. But it's not just the top-heavy part of it. There's, 10 or 12 guys that you've told me that just the top 10 of this class could potentially be going in the top, 4 rounds? Maybe even higher than that. There's some position versatility guys. You got some raw guys. Prince Tegawanago kind of, is one of the raw guys that could potentially work himself into the second round. Lucas Niang out of TCU. There's another guy that could potentially work his way second, third round kind of a guy. Like there's just a lot to like about this offensive tackle class. And with the Broncos potentially looking at a position versatile guy that can play at the right tackle position and take over for Juwan James if he potentially gets hurt, but as a starter for the right guard position if Ronald Leary goes, obviously Tristan Wirfs has to be the guy if that's what you're looking for.
There's definitely a lot of options, and I think that Tristan Wirfs is one guy that makes a lot of sense. Jedrick Wills, he makes some sense. But I don't think that Denver has to go offensive tackle at 15 to find an option here. You have Hakeem Adeniji out of Kansas, who's looking very good at the Senior Bowl this week, that he can play inside or outside. John Runyon, I know I listed him at interior offensive line, but he played at left tackle at Michigan, and he's looked solid there throughout the Shrine. Well, he looked solid there throughout the Shrine Bowl. moved inside, and he looked a little bit better. Calvin Throckmorton, I'm not big of him on the outside in the NFL, and he definitely played a lot better on the inside, but he's definitely an option. Alex Taylor, he's killing it. Well, I don't want to say he's killing it. He's having some struggles with technique, but he's definitely showing his potential. One guy that's definitely after the Senior Bowl that I'm going to be keeping my eyes on is Terrence Steele. I always liked him a little bit more, but he's down there, and he is killing it in Mobile, Alabama. Just having a huge week there. Then you've got Jack Driscoll, you've got Josh Jones, Isaiah Wilsons, you've got Matthew Pert, Colton McKivitz, Jake Benzinger out of Wake Forest, and his teammate Justin Herron. Darren Paulo out of Utah. You've got Austin Jackson, Drew Richmond, Scott France. The names go on and on and on. Sadiq Charles, Mekhi Becton. You've got probably 6-7 offensive tackles that can go in the top 40 picks. You've got probably another 4 or 5 or so that can probably go in the top 100. You've got another probably 6 or 7 that can probably go in the top 150. Very strong class of offensive tackles from top to bottom.
Now, a guy that I've seen rising up a lot of draft boards, and especially in the Twitter community right now, is a guy, you mentioned his name just briefly, but I want to get your rundown on this young man out of Louisville, Mekhi Becton. Tell me a little bit more about this guy, because I really don't know. I haven't seen any film of him yet, and just the way that his meteoric rise and potentially could possibly be a first-round pick. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think that he will be a first-round pick. I would not be surprised if he goes in the top 15. He's got tremendous power to his game. Very big dude. I think he's 360 plus, 370 plus. Very tremendous size, tremendous length, 6'8", power for days. But he's very nimble. He's got those light feet that are able to get out in front of quicker pass rushes a little bit. He does struggle with some speed, so his feet aren't the quickest. But if you're letting him go and get his long arms on you and just let him move a little bit in a power gap scheme, then yeah, I think that you'll be just fine. I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on him as being a left tackle full-time in the NFL. I think that for the first few years, you definitely want him at right tackle, and that might be where you want him full-time. But I think that, yeah, he's definitely worth a top 15 pick. Big dude, plenty of power, but also very nimble feet.
That's great analysis, man. I love it. Now, our final, before we wrap this up, we are hitting the God tier, the S tier, the supreme tier, and it is one that everybody has been pounding the table for, especially if you're a Broncos fan. This wide receiver draft class, man, I tell you what, this is probably the best wide receiver draft class that we've seen since, 2014, 2015 at least, where you might see 20 guys go in the top 100. I mean, obviously Jerry Jeudy at the top of the class. Well, CeeDee Lamb, depending on what your flavor is, either those 1A and 1B. Henry Ruggs, Jalen Reagor, the kid out of Clemson that his name escapes me for some reason. I do apologize for that. T. Higgins, that's the one. Thank you. I mean, there's just so much to love about this. You've got big physical possession guys. You've got guys that can create yards after the catch in Laviska Shenault out of Colorado. You've got the hybrid types in KJ Hill and Denzel Mims out of Baylor. You've got Devin Duvernay out of Texas, Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Michigan. There is just so much to love about this wide receiver class, man. It's so top heavy, but it's not necessarily just top heavy. There's just well-rounded depth all the way through. And then for the Broncos, obviously we're going to kind of try to be focusing here more directly on a guy that can create yards after the catch in Pat Shurmur's new offensive scheme. But there is absolutely no reason why the Broncos should not double dip in this wide receiver class and potentially go and get a guy that can take the top off of the defense. There's the kid out of Nebraska, the late round prospect, deep burner kind of guy, J.D. Spielman. That's his name. Thank you very much. There's no reason why the Broncos shouldn't be going after at least 2 of these wide receiver prospects this year, Eric.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And guys, that's going to wrap it up for us today. We're not going to talk about the wide receiver class anymore. No, just kidding. This wide receiver class is the best class ever. If you want to argue with me about that, I will happily throw hands and sit there and debate this all day. This is the best wide receiver class ever. I can't remember a class where I've had I think it's 22 receivers in the top 100. And that number could potentially grow by the time the Combine comes around. Because KJ Hill's not in there, and he's had a tremendous week at the Cedar Bowl. But I want to see how athletic he is. That's going to be a huge part of his evaluation for me. Juwan Jennings out of Tennessee. he's having a great week at the Senior Bowl. He's always been talked about a late-round guy. But if he goes out there and he kills it at the combine with his athletic testing, he can really shoot up boards. Big physical guy that if he can run about under a 4.45 40, oh yeah, teams are really going to open their eyes up. And his 3-cone time is going to be pretty important for him because he definitely does rely on his quickness to get open and get separation. Colin Johnson, he's a guy at Texas who, again, 6'6", 220, 230 pounds, like just big dude. But his routes at the Senior Bowl have been fantastic.
It's been amazing, guys. Absolutely amazing. Colin Johnson has been probably the best route runner outside of Van Jefferson at the Senior Bowl. It's been absolutely amazing to watch him run routes.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, it hasn't been some of the best. I mean, Denzel Mims and KJ Hill, they've definitely been better as well. But Courtney Davis, he's another guy. Marquez Callaway, if he runs as fast as people are talking about with like around 4.25, yeah, he's going to shoot up a little bit. I don't think he'll shoot up in the top 100 though. But just going back to that, here's just the guys that I can see going in the top 100 right now. Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Brandon Ayuk. You've got Denzel Mims, potentially John Hightower, T. Higgins, Laviska Shenault. You've got Van Jefferson, Antonio Gandy Golden, Justin Jefferson. You've got Tyler Johnson. You've got KJ Hill, CeeDee Lamb, KJ Hamler, James Prochet, Brian Edwards, Jalen Reagor, Juwan Jennings, Colin Johnson, Devin Duvernay, Courtney Davis, Michael Pittman, Kalijah Lipscomb. Like, there's a lot of guys here. And yeah, some talent left, or decided to return to school. But this class, man, like, I just can't get over how good it is. It is the best wide receiver class ever. Like, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Plenty of options for the Broncos if they want speed to stretch the field, which they do need. Some good options for them for yards after the catch monsters. Like, this is a good year to need a receiver. Like, the best year ever to need a receiver.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And as I said, there's no reason for the Broncos to not double dip at the wide receiver position. Now, there was an interesting...
They should triple dip.
That very well could be a possibility. Now, there was an interesting question that I saw from Brandon Miller on Twitter, and he asked, if you had the opportunity to take either Henry Ruggs or Laviska Shenault in the first round, and you're sitting there looking pretty, and all of a sudden you have Jalen Reagor fall to you in your second round pick, do you pull the trigger and go back-to-back wide receivers?
It would depend. If I take Henry Ruggs at 15, I'm not taking Jalen Reagor in the second round. If I take Laviska Shenault at the 15, then yeah, I'm taking Jalen Reagor in the second round. All depends. I don't want to have two guys down there creating speed and not helping with the spacing issues the Broncos have. You only need one speedster. Jalen Reagor, I mean, speed isn't the only name to his game, but if I'm looking at Jalen Reagor in the second round, I want him paired up with a guy who can create yards after the catch. Same with Henry Ruggs at 15. So if you want Jalen Reagor in the second round, if you're going to double dip there, Laviska Shenault, Jalen Reagor, oh man, am I on board for that. Henry Ruggs and Jalen Reagor, I mean, okay, I can be on board with it, but it'd be a little bit rough of a pill to swallow.
Okay. Well, that's a great way to wrap this show up. Thank you all once again for joining us on the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. You guys can follow us both on Twitter by finding me at Sanderson MHH and for Eric at Erick Trickel. Also, be sure to follow at Mile High Huddle. Set up your notifications for instant updates on your Denver Broncos. Each and every story published on the Huddle website is posted immediately on our Twitter handle, so you guys have instant access right at your fingertips. You guys can also like Mile High Huddle's Facebook page as well. We love and appreciate all of your guys' support, and if it weren't for you all, we wouldn't be able to do what we do best, which is cover your Denver Broncos. So until next time, Broncos country, you guys stay safe, take care, and have a good one.